I thought my marriage was unbreakable until I found hidden messages that shattered my world. Behind every smile was a secret betrayal, and every loving gesture masked a long game. This is how I uncovered the truth and planned my response. I want to share my story with you. I never imagined that the life I built with Claire could be anything but rock solid. From the moment we exchanged vows 10 years ago, our marriage felt like a fortress of mutual respect and affection. I woke up every morning knowing she was by my side, that she loved me deeply, and that I would never have to question her loyalty. We bought our first house together, painted its walls in calming neutrals, and filled each room with furniture we selected with care. I remember her laughter echoing through the living room, the way she always found reasons to surprise me, and how I did the same for her. In my mind, this was the picture of stability. We carved a routine that felt safe and comfortable. Every Saturday morning we made coffee together, our mugs clinking gently as we planned the day. Some weekends we wandered through local art fairs, hand in hand, stopping to admire half-finished paintings or handcrafted jewelry. Other times we would stay in, binge-watching crime dramas while sharing a blanket on the couch. I brought her breakfast in bed when deadlines at work kept me up late. She repaid me with weekend road trips to unfamiliar towns, where we chased down hole-in-the-wall diners and sipped wine by the lake. There was a rhythm to us, a synergy that I believed was grounded in unwavering trust. Claire and I both worked demanding jobs, but we lifted each other up, always making time for date nights. I still remember the scent of her perfume when she slipped into the little black dress I bought her for our 5th anniversary. I felt proud, as did she, when I introduced her to colleagues at every work event. We celebrated promotions, birthdays, and holidays like clockwork. Our friends often said we were the golden couple, the kind other people envied, and secretly I loved that. It gave me a sense of accomplishment, knowing our home was a sanctuary, what some would call a castle built to withstand any storm. I felt secure enough to reveal my most vulnerable thoughts to her. I told Claire about my nightmares, my obsession with security in every aspect of life, from locking doors to balancing our accounts meticulously. She listened, held me close, and assured me that everything would always be fine. I believed her. When I traveled for work, she would send me photos of her day, a text every hour or so, just to let me know she was thinking of me. I thought that kind of devotion was rare, a sign that our bond was ironclad. Each message made me feel more connected, more certain that I was the center of her world as she was mine. At social gatherings, I never once sensed a shadow behind her eyes. There was no hesitation when she laughed at my jokes, no distant look in her smile. She carried my wedding ring on her finger with pride, and I saw no reason to doubt for a moment. For years, my internal alarm never even whispered. I had set up online accounts in both our names, we shared credit cards, and I believed that any discrepancy would come to light through our shared budgeting system. She never brought up money issues or questioned my decisions. Everything felt transparent, cooperative, ideal. I was so immersed in that picture of stability that it left me blind to the subtle cracks forming in the foundation. I never checked her phone beyond the reminders she asked me to add, never thought to question where she went after her yoga classes. When she volunteered late at the animal shelter, I complimented her generosity, never pausing to wonder why she would leave me waiting dinner after dinner. The routine we built became a fortress that I assumed would last indefinitely, a fortress that wouldn't reveal any secret passageways or hidden corridors. In retrospect, that complacency was my first mistake. Looking back now, I can see how easily I was lulled into comfort. I wore my love like a shield, convinced that it was impregnable. I threw myself into work, into weekend projects, into planning our future, never suspecting that Claire might be spinning her own webs behind my back. The years of marriage before the storm felt calm and reassuring, as though the calmest sea must never hide dangerous undercurrents. I believed our union was the epitome of mutual trust. And so I let my guard down completely, unaware that the true battle was only just beginning. I first sensed something was off when Claire started disappearing into her phone with a guarded intensity I had never seen before. It began innocuously enough. She claimed she'd taken up evening painting classes at a studio downtown. She made it sound charming, as if she'd found a hidden passion for watercolors and acrylics. I congratulated her on discovering this creative outlet and made space in our calendar for her new hobby. But after a few weeks, her stories didn't add up. Sometimes I'd ask how her class went, and she'd offer only a vague smile, her eyes darting away before she'd murmur that it was fine. That niggling unease dragged at the edges of my mind, but I pushed it aside, telling myself it was my own anxiety playing tricks on me. In my head, I repeated the mantra we'd shared at couples therapy years ago: trust, communicate, believe in each other. Then came the phone protection. Claire never asked to set a passcode before. It always felt like an unnecessary barrier between us. One evening I reached for her handset to show her a photo I'd taken on my way home, and she recoiled, telling me she'd stored personal sketches on it she didn't want me to see. I nodded and backed off, but I noticed how her thumb hovered over the lock screen, how she pressed it a little too quickly whenever I passed by. My heartbeat jerked each time her phone chimed after midnight, though she assured me it was just her new work friend texting about a shared project. The term work friend began to taste bitter on my tongue. She mentioned that friend more and more, a colleague named Derek who apparently worked in marketing. Claire's voice carried an odd warmth whenever she spoke his name, a lightness I hadn't heard since the earliest days of our relationship. She told me Derek had invited her to dinner after work, and she'd hesitated, proudly telling me she'd decided I was her priority. But the next week she complained about a late-night meeting, and when I teased her about the long hours, she brushed it off and said this one was critical. I watched her schedule shift under my gaze, a map of detours and dead ends that seemed to avoid our home. She was protective of her time, protective of her phone, and suspiciously protective of her version of events. I felt a pang of suspicion that evening when I discovered a restaurant receipt folded between the pages of her journal, dated on a Tuesday night when she'd told me she was volunteering at the shelter. It listed 2 meals, 1 entree, 1 salad, and a wine for 2. My pulse quickened as I turned it over and over, trying to convince myself it was a mistake, maybe someone else's bill accidentally slipped in. But my gut tightened into a knot that refused to release. I laughed it off when she walked in later, asking about her shelf of paints, and I even kissed her forehead, telling her I loved her. Inside, though, tension curled around my ribs like steel wire. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I couldn't let jealousy win. But the first loose thread had come free, and I instinctively felt that tug would unravel everything I thought I knew. I didn't plan to confront Claire that night. I only intended to grab my laptop from the desk and finish a report for work. The house was quiet, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Our dog, Baxter, curled at my feet as I opened my laptop and noticed her Chrome window still running. I hesitated, yet the tab was blinking, a Slack conversation with someone named Derek. My heart pounded as I clicked. The messages spilled across the screen like poison. "Good morning, my love," one text read, followed by a heart emoji. Later, I saw intimate notes. "I can't stop thinking about you and how are you holding up, darling?" I scrolled faster, my mind racing. The date stamps went back over a year, 11 months of messages, sometimes early morning musings, sometimes heated confessions. The chatter wasn't just about lunch plans or project deadlines. They spoke of longing, of stolen moments, of dinners in dimly lit restaurants where Claire would press her hand into his, her thumb tracing the lines of his palm. I didn't read every line, I didn't need to. My vision blurred as I skimmed entries about Derek missing her laugh, about Claire promising to make time for him. There was talk of secret weekend getaways, hotel reservations, flight confirmations, every message meticulously archived. I felt the betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, my breath shallow as I realized the breadth of her deceit. It wasn't a fling born out of a moment of weakness. It was an emotional affair that had grown into something she valued as deeply as she supposedly valued me. A message caught my eye. "I wish you were here with me," Claire replied. I froze. My wife, my partner of 10 years, wished to be with another man. Rage and grief warred inside me, each vying for control. Baxter whined softly, sensing my agitation, but I didn't notice. I closed the chat, but my hands shook so hard I almost dropped the laptop. I searched our shared drives, half hoping I'd find more proof, photographs, a video clip, anything to confirm the depth of her betrayal. There it was, a folder named Escape Plan. In it, photos of her packing a weekender bag, the name of the hotel etched in the corner of a confirmation email, a love note from Derek folded into the pages of a novel. My stomach turned as I realized she'd been planning not just secret meetups but an eventual departure. She had coordinates in her travel history that didn't match any vacation I'd approved. I shut the laptop and leaned back, the chair creaking under me. I stared at the ceiling, trying to process the magnitude of her lies. All those evenings spent painting, volunteering, working late, they were cover stories. All the gift wrapping and date nights I'd meticulously planned meant nothing. Every day of my life had been a stage, and I'd been the main act in a play written by someone else. I felt stripped bare, the layers of trust and hope peeled away to reveal raw, gaping wounds. My first instinct was to confront her. I imagined standing in front of her, screaming until my throat went raw, demanding explanations for every secret message. But another instinct surfaced: calculation. This was bigger than a domestic scene in the middle of the night. This was evidence, a long-term emotional conspiracy that I could use. I would need more legal proof, financial trails, corroboration from Derek's wife if she existed. My pulse slowed as I recognized the opportunity hidden in my fury. I knew my next steps had to be deliberate. I would archive these messages, timestamp them, back them up to a secure drive. I'd take screenshots, note the dates. Then I'd watch, collect. I wouldn't let her see I knew she was too dangerous when cornered. I'd turn her own web of lies into a snare. I stood, tucked the laptop under my arm, and carried it to my study. I locked the door behind me, the click echoing in the empty hallway. In that moment, I felt a shift, something inside me steeling itself for what came next. My image of Claire shattered into shards I couldn't piece together. I realized the wife I thought I had, the partnership I'd believed in, was a mirage. But I also recognized that I had a weapon, truth on my side, armed with dates and declarations. I would dismantle her facade, brick by brick, until there was nothing left but the ruin she'd built herself. I left the study door slightly ajar for Baxter, whose soft whines reminded me I wasn't alone. I sat in the living room, the laptop on my lap, rereading the messages in a cold, clinical silence. Betrayal invited anger, but in its raw blueprint was strategy, my path forward. The unraveling had begun, and I would see this through to the bitter end. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, the glow of my laptop screen still fresh behind my eyelids. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's messages, her laughter in dim restaurants, the longing in her words. My throat burned with unshed tears, my hands trembled as I pulled the sheets closer. I knew in that darkness that nothing would ever be the same, yet I also knew that raw confrontation would destroy any chance I had of collecting the evidence I would need. So I made my choice. I would wear my mask, I would play the part, and the long con would begin. Before dawn broke, I slipped out of bed and quietly dressed in the clothes I had laid out the night before. My heart pounded so loudly I thought Claire might wake, but she didn't stir. In the kitchen, I measured coffee grounds with the same precision I always had, wiped the counter until it gleamed, and placed 2 plates on the table. I sliced fresh strawberries and arranged them around her favorite omelet, folded neatly into quarters. The aroma of cooking bacon filled the room, blending with the sound of the toaster popping. I felt the familiar surge of care I used to feel, and I embraced it like a practiced actor stepping into character. When Claire padded into the kitchen in her robe, she blinked at the spread and offered me that soft smile I once found so reassuring. I handed her a steaming mug of coffee. "Morning, love," I said, voice warm and steady. She hummed, taking a sip, and I watched her eyes close in contentment. My chest twisted and ached, but I held her gaze. I asked about her painting class the night before, feigned excitement when she told me about a breakthrough she did blending pastel colors. She spoke animatedly, unaware that the foundations of our world were crumbling beneath her. I kissed her cheek before she left for work, just as I always did. I whispered "I love you" into her hair, squeezed her hand, and watched her head out the door. She turned briefly with that familiar glance over her shoulder, the one that said she adored me. I swallowed the lump in my throat and waved. As soon as she was gone, I leaned against the doorframe, closed my eyes, and let a single tear fall. Then I dried my cheek, squared my shoulders, and stepped back into the kitchen. The mask was secure, my part rehearsed, the game had begun. All day, I poured myself into small acts of normalcy. I texted her midday to ask how her day was going. I bought flowers en route to work and had them delivered to our home. I found myself humming the tune I'd first danced to at our wedding reception, and I felt the pang of every memory, both the good and the betrayal-tinged. Every time my phone buzzed, I swallowed the urge to scan her messages, to rip the mask away and demand answers. Instead, I reminded myself that knowledge was power, and power was patience. That afternoon, I booked a dinner reservation at the restaurant where she first met Derek under the guise of a business lunch with colleagues. I logged onto the hotel website where she'd made her secret booking and checked availability for the same dates, just to remind myself of what she'd planned. Each keystroke was a promise I made to myself not to break. I would gather every piece of her deceit, store it securely, and wait for the right moment to strike. When Claire finally walked through the door that evening, she smiled at me like she always did, and for a moment my heart twisted, torn between love and hatred. She leaned in for a kiss, unsuspecting, and I kissed her back, tasting the faint hint of wine on her lips. She murmured my name, ran her fingers through my hair, and I felt the steel in my resolve harden. I whispered "I missed you today," letting her believe I'd been counting the seconds until she returned. We ate dinner together, our conversation light and unremarkable, weekend plans, a new show to binge, a minor home repair that needed attention. I made suggestions, she nodded, we laughed. The image of Derek's messages never left my mind, but I carefully tucked it away behind calm smiles. Every act of affection, every gesture of normalcy, was a brick in the wall I was building around my true purpose. After dinner, I walked her to the door, kissed her goodnight, and promised to see her in the morning. I watched her climb the stairs to our bedroom, and I waited until I heard the click of her door before quietly slipping away. I retrieved my laptop from the study, opened those Slack messages again, and began to organize them, dates, times, confessions, into a file named evidence. I backed it up to an external drive, encrypted it, and hid the drive in a place she'd never find. As I closed the study door and walked back to the kitchen, I felt a grim satisfaction. The mask was in place. She believed I was oblivious that I was still the loving husband who wanted nothing more than to support her new painting hobby. In reality, I was far from oblivious. I had seen the messages, I had felt the sting of every word, and now I would wait quietly and patiently until the web she'd spun around me was taut enough to snap. Then I would let her fall. The long con had begun, and there was no turning back. I moved through our home like a ghost, performing every gesture of devotion with the precision of a surgeon making incisions. While Claire believed I was pouring my heart into preserving our marriage, I was actually constructing the framework of her undoing. The first step was installing spyware on her phone and laptop. I waited until she left for yoga early one morning, slipped into her office, and downloaded an app that covertly recorded every keystroke, captured screenshots, and forwarded logs to a secure cloud folder only I could access. I labeled the folder Evidence Raw Data and watched it populate over the next few days with texts, emails, location tracking, and call records. Every evening, as she lounged in the living room painting or scrolling on social media, I clicked through the spyware dashboard on my own device. I checked her GPS coordinates when she said she was at the shelter. I reviewed her messages to Derek in real time, cataloging new declarations of desire, new weekend plans. I saw her lie before she even had the chance to speak. The knowledge fueled me, gave me a grim confidence. Next, I hired a private investigator under the guise of needing help finding a lost dog. The Pie shadowed Derek and Claire separately, tailing them to the same downtown cafe where they met. He photographed them entering Derek's apartment building, greeted by hushed embraces, quick pecks on the lips. He recorded their license plates and confirmed that Derek's wife was on a business trip for 2 weeks, proof that Claire had time alone to deepen the affair. The investigator documented it all: flight itineraries, hotel check-ins, even receipts for late-night room service. I sat in my car watching the Pie's updates pop up on my phone, every image a nail in the coffin. Parallel to this, I consulted a divorce lawyer who specialized in asset protection. I told her I was thinking ahead, making sure I could support Claire if she ever needed financial help for her art supplies or studio rent. Behind that facade, I was quietly transferring joint investments into a revocable trust in my name alone, establishing a separate account for our monthly mortgage payments, and creating a paper trail that made it impossible for Claire to claim half our savings or the bonus I was expecting from my year-end performance review. I drafted prenuptial-style amendments to our marital agreement under the pretext of estate planning, clauses that stipulated clear divisions for real estate, retirement accounts, and business equity. The lawyer assured me these changes would pass muster if executed with care. So I scheduled a couples meeting at our favorite cafe and persuaded Claire to join me, claiming I wanted her input on our future. Over lattes, I slid the documents across the table with a smile, praising her financial savvy and asking her to initial each page. She glanced over them briefly, trusting me implicitly, then signed where I pointed. Every act of generosity I performed had a hidden agenda. I arranged for a handyman to fix a leaky pipe in the bathroom, but his real assignment was to install a discreet surveillance camera in the hallway. I bought Claire a new tablet for her digital sketches, preloaded with tracking software that mirrored her files back to me. When I suggested we take a weekend trip to the coast, I chose the seaside in where I had already reserved a conference room under my alias, an impromptu venue where I planned to meet with the Pie and my lawyer to finalize the evidence presentation and asset division strategy. Claire gushed about the surprise, and I took her hand, knowing she believed she was safely ensconced in my unwavering devotion. At night, I compiled the incoming data into folders labeled by type: messages, locations, financial. I backed everything up to 2 encrypted drives hidden in different spots, one in the crawl space, another taped under my desk drawer. I reviewed the images of Claire's fingerprints on Derek's hotel room glass, the text where she promised to leave me as soon as Derek's wife returned, and the routing numbers for wire transfers she'd set up under my name. Each piece confirmed her intent, dismantling our life together to build one with him. Yet during the day, I was the perfect spouse. I brewed her coffee just the way she liked it, delivered it to her bedside with a kiss. I suggested spontaneous date nights at the art museum, feigning renewed passion for her talent. I listened closely when she spoke of color palettes and composition, never revealing that I'd already reviewed the drafts of her new portfolio she'd emailed Derek. I was her biggest cheerleader, the loving husband on the outside and the architect of her ruin on the inside. With every loving gesture, I reinforced the illusion of safety and trust. Claire's complacency deepened. She never suspected that the man she adored was collecting the road map to her downfall. I allowed her to believe I was blinded by love when in reality I saw everything with ruthless clarity. Piece by piece, I was building the case I would unveil in due time, a case so airtight that her collapse would be inevitable and total. The shadows were now my domain, and each secret move brought me one step closer to the final act of my long con. I spent the next week weaving a net so tight that escape would be impossible. Every morning I woke before dawn, checked the spyware logs for new messages, and downloaded fresh screenshots into meticulously labeled folders. I cataloged dates, times, locations, and explicit details, each a brick strengthening the case I was building against Claire and Derek. I even discovered a hidden document on Claire's laptop titled Forever Us, a draft of vows she intended to exchange with Derek at a private ceremony he'd already booked in another state. As I sifted through the files, I realized Derek wasn't just her secret lover, he was a married man. His LinkedIn profile showed he'd been in a 10-year marriage with a woman named Angela, complete with anniversary posts and vacation photos tagging them as a happy couple. I hired the PI to confirm her identity and uncover her address. Within days, I received photos of Derek greeting Angela at the airport after a business trip, his arms wrapped around her waist. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined. Claire wasn't only cheating on me, she was dismantling two lives at once. I drafted a series of anonymous emails to Angela, attaching evidence of Derek's communications with Claire. I sent snippets of their messages, without revealing my involvement, along with photos from the PI showing Derek leaving Claire's apartment late at night. I watched for my emails to land, waited for replies, and noted Angela's responses. She was devastated, confused, begging for more proof. I fed her additional documents from my evidence raw data, carefully redacting anything that might trace back to me. Every forwarded screenshot stung Claire anew in my mind, every fragment of betrayal magnified. Meanwhile, I moved swiftly to secure our finances. Under the guise of rebalancing investments for better returns, I convinced Claire to sign paperwork shifting our joint stocks and bonds into new holdings I controlled. I framed it as a retirement planning strategy, something she'd asked me about when she expressed uncertainty about our future. We sat at the dining table while I explained the benefits of this conservative asset allocation, and she clicked through the digital signature prompts without reading the fine print. Behind the scenes, I funneled our savings into ventures registered in my name alone, an LLC for a tech startup I planned to join, a trust fund earmarked for our children's education that legally belonged to me as trustee. As these transactions went through, Claire had no idea that the net was tightening around her. She still believed we were partners in every sense, that our finances were joint and transparent. I set up alerts on her bank account so I'd know if she tried transferring money out or making large purchases. I watched her ATM withdrawals and online shopping sprees, making notes of each transaction in my growing dossier. This knowledge gave me leverage. I could dictate the pace of her downfall and ensure she had no resources left when the dust settled. During this same period, I asked the PI to dig up any records of Derek's illegal activities. I learned he had a speeding ticket from last year that he'd never paid, and I hired a skip tracer to retrieve the unpaid fines. I knew that exposing Derek's minor criminal record to Angela would heighten her anger and sympathy toward my situation. I sent her those documents too, each one another thread pulling her deeper into the web of betrayal. Every gesture of normalcy I performed for Claire was now laced with intent. When I surprised her with lunch at the art studio, I had the PI parked outside photographing her reactions to Derek's messages, proving her emotional attachment. When I roasted vegetables for dinner, I was really celebrating another successful financial transfer. When I complimented her on her brushstrokes, I listened for her mentions of Derek, verifying them against the spyware logs. By the end of the week, I had a mountain of evidence, hundreds of screenshots, hours of location tracking, bank statements, legal records, and messages from Derek's wife. I organized everything into a secure folder named Final Exhibit, ready for presentation. I knew that once I released this cache, Claire's world would collapse in on itself. She would lose my support, Derek's wife would seek divorce, and with my financial safeguards in place, she'd be left with nothing. One evening, as Claire leaned against me on the couch while watching her favorite movie, I placed a hand on her knee and felt the last thread of our marriage slipping away. She sighed contentedly, unaware that the architect of her ruin sat beside her, orchestrating her downfall. In a few days, this net would cinch her in, and there would be no escape from the betrayal laid bare for everyone to see. The pieces were in place, and soon the final act would begin. I spent the entire day in a whirlwind of preparation, orchestrating every detail of our 10th anniversary celebration as if I were staging the final scene of a play. I hired a caterer from the city to prepare Claire's favorite dishes: seared scallops with lemon beurre blanc, roasted beet salad with goat cheese, and chocolate molten cakes for dessert. I rented a string quartet to play our wedding song as guests arrived, and I arranged the tables so they'd form a perfect arc around the dance floor. Each place setting held a handwritten menu and a small photo of Claire and me at a happy moment. Our graduation, the day we bought our house, our first vacation in Italy. I even commissioned a local florist to craft centerpieces of white peonies and blush roses, Claire's preferred blooms. As the sun dipped below the horizon, headlights began to stream into our driveway. Friends from college, colleagues from work, neighbors we'd known since the early days of our relationship, they all stepped out of their cars in cocktail attire, greeting Claire with hugs and congratulations. When she emerged from the house in her silk emerald gown, her face lit up with pleasure and surprise. She paused at the bottom of the steps, eyes scanning the scene, and for a moment she looked at me with genuine appreciation. I smiled, handed her a glass of champagne, and wove my arm through hers as we welcomed everyone. Unbeknownst to Claire, I had extended a special invitation to Angela, Derek's wife. I told her I was celebrating a decade of marriage and that I genuinely believed she might find some comfort in witnessing a marriage renewed. I assured her the evening would be tasteful and not intended to embarrass anyone. In my vague but calculated invitation, I promised warmth and support, and she accepted, desperate for clarity and wounded by the emails I'd sent with evidence of Derek's betrayal. Inside, I paced myself between congenial host and attentive husband. I poured wine for our guests, listened to toasts about our devotion, feigned laughter at old anecdotes, and marveled at the way Claire's face shone under the fairy lights strung across the patio. I could see her confidence in our bond, her belief that nothing could threaten the foundation we'd built. She had no idea that our anniversary dinner was the centerpiece of my revenge, the stage I'd chosen for the final exposure. Just as the string quartet began to play our song, I raised my glass to signal the start of the official toasts. Conversations hushed into polite murmurs. I felt my pulse steady, the adrenaline mixing with cold determination. Claire looked at me expectantly, her hand resting lightly on my arm. I swept my gaze across the crowd until I found Angela seated at a table in the far corner. She met my eyes, pale and shocked, a silent question in her stare. I nodded ever so slightly. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice clear over the soft notes of the quartet. "Tonight marks 10 years since Claire and I vowed to stand by each other through every joy and every hardship. I wanted to celebrate not just our love but also the truth that has shaped who we are." I paused, letting the tension build. I let guests exchange curious glances. They say time reveals all things. In these 10 years, I've learned that trust is the bedrock of any relationship. Without it, everything crumbles. I raised my glass higher. So let us toast to trust, its power, its fragility, and the consequences when it's broken. A ripple of applause followed, but something in my tone made the clapping hesitant. Claire's smile faltered, confusion flickering in her eyes. I lowered my glass and reached into my jacket pocket, pulling out an envelope sealed with red wax. The string quartet drifted into silence. I held the envelope aloft. Inside this envelope is a collection of messages, photographs, and records. They document an emotional betrayal, one that's been ongoing for over a year. I believe everyone here deserves to know the truth. I extended the envelope toward Claire. She stared at it, disbelief etched across her features. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Near the back, Angela rose to her feet, her own hands trembling as she clutched a folder I'd provided her earlier. The murmur in the crowd escalated into a low roar. Glasses clinked on tables, forks stilled, and families who'd once toasted our happiness now sat stunned at the revelation unfolding before them. I met Claire's gaze steadily. "I discovered your affair, the secret hotel stays, and your plans to build a life with him. I've invited everyone here so they can see how you turned our marriage into a lie." A hush fell. Claire's face drained of color. Guests looked at one another, horrified. The string quartet restarted with a somber tune. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of what I'd done, and then I opened them resolute. "To honesty," I said, lifting an imaginary glass with my free hand. "May it always carve the path forward, no matter how devastating the journey." I turned and walked away from the podium, leaving Claire standing amid the ruins of our celebration, her world collapsing as the guests shifted in their seats, stunned by the reveal that would haunt her from this night on. I tapped the microphone and smiled at Claire, the woman I once believed was my soulmate. 10 years ago, I stood here and vowed to love you through every high and every low," I began, voice warm and steady. Glasses clinked as guests raised their champagne in response. Claire's eyes glistened with relief, as though she thought this would be another sentimental speech filled with rosy reflections. I paused, let the anticipation build. "Tonight is about love, yes," I continued, my tone softening as I reached into my pocket for the first envelope. I looked at her tenderly, "but also about truth." I opened the envelope, pulling out a small sheet of paper. "This," I said, "is the very first message I discovered, sent from a number that isn't mine." I read aloud a line Claire wrote to Derek: "I can't wait to feel your arms around me again." The room went quiet, forks hovered mid-bite, Claire's breath hitched. I signaled to the caterer and dim lights shifted onto the patio's far wall where I'd set up a projector. A grainy photo appeared, Claire and Derek in an embrace on a hotel balcony, the city lights beyond them. I watched the color drain from her face. That was last July during our anniversary trip, I said. Except I wasn't there, you were with him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I clicked a remote. A second image, a screenshot of her calendar marked secret weekend getaway. The caption read, Hotel Ocean View, Room 412. I let the images sink in before I played the first audio clip. The soft hum of a hotel corridor, then Claire's voice whispering Derek's name, followed by his reply, You're mine tonight. My chest tightened at the memory of listening to it for the first time, but I held my ground. I watched as friends shifted uncomfortably, children pulled at their parents' sleeves, and Claire's cheeks glistened with tears. My heart broke when I realized this was no fleeting mistake, I said, voice cold now. This was a year-long emotional affair that destroyed the trust between us. I advanced the slideshow to reveal bank statements showing wire transfers Claire made to Derek's account, their annotated totals highlighted in red. I've protected my assets, as you will see, but here's what remains of ours, I said, displaying a pie chart of our joint savings now under my name. You'll find that there's nothing left for you. Murmurs of shock spread through the guests. I turned toward the side entrance, and Angela stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. I motioned for her to join me. She carried a folder labeled proof, and from it she pulled out additional messages. Derek's admission that he loved Claire more than his own wife, Angela's wedding photos, and a text where Derek promised Claire he'd leave Angela the moment she returned from her business trip. Claire's sobs filled the space between my words. I faced the crowd again. Angela was also betrayed by the man I now reveal as the other party in this affair. I gestured toward Angela, standing stiffly in a sequin dress she clearly hadn't wanted to wear. She looked at Claire with a mixture of sympathy and anger. Then I raised the envelope containing our final divorce papers, still sealed. Claire, I'm serving you this tonight. Consider this our last dance. I extended the envelope toward her from the stage as though presenting an award. Claire knelt to pick it up, clutching it to her chest, her body shaking. I watched her for a moment, remembering the warmth of her smile before it curdled into betrayal. Then I nodded to the string quartet, who struck a single somber chord. I stepped away from the podium, my work complete, and walked through the slightest opening in the crowd. I didn't look back. Behind me, chaos rippled outward. Guests rose, shouting questions, accusations, tears mixing with outrage. Angela approached Derek, her fists clenched. Claire collapsed to the floor, burying her face in her hands. Wine glasses shattered, plates were overturned, and the elegant anniversary dinner became a war zone of shredded emotions. I heard Claire's voice calling my name, pleading, but I slowed my steps and sighed with finality. Outside, the night air hit me like cold water. I slid into my car, unlocked the door, and settled into the driver's seat. I watched through the windshield as the patio lights flickered and flames of anger burned bright among the guests. I started the engine and drove away, leaving wreckage in my rearview mirror, ruined friendships, destroyed marriages, and the debris of a love that had died by my own design. My mask had fallen away, the long con complete, and I felt nothing but the steady hum of vengeance satisfied.